Center is organizing a series of lectures from today onwards as part of helping our research scholars to sharpen their theoretical tools. Most often we have research methodology courses designed in such a way that you get only skills, a very little component of theory or philosophy behind research and like that. Not last year, actually in 2022-23, early 23, we had a series of lectures arranged as part of winter research methodology workshop. We had about 25-30 students registered as part of it, and it was web-based, basically web-based lectures because of the pandemic situation. Now that we are planning to organize this series, theory and method series, in a hybrid mode, we will be having offline and online lectures that will be held up to early August. We will be informing research scholars of this university as well as other universities as and when these lectures are organized. We are also having this partnership with Chrysostom Chair of Mahatma Gandhi University, headed by Dr. Iucssre. And also we are planning to have some lectures organized in association with the Gregorios Chair, headed by Professor Father K.M. George. And also we are organizing today's lecture in collaboration with Deleuze-Guattari collective in India, of which Dr. Varghese is the president of this particular association. So I don't want to go into the details of all these things, the lecture content and the programs like that. The idea behind organizing this lecture series is to help students in a way that they have theoretical insights while doing research. And as I said earlier, without theory you cannot do research. But we often place less emphasis on theory in our research in such a way that you have a kind of a thinking that you can do everything empirically, you can do everything practically without insights. So there comes the role of philosophy and sociology, which I consider these two disciplines as the most foundational disciplines of research, modern research. But even in sociological research, you won't find even philosophical content or philosophical insights in terms of sharpening your tools while doing research, whether in empirical research or in theoretical research. So I believe that we all believe that this series will help underline the importance of theory in research, social theory primarily, but deriving insights from different disciplines, from philosophy to anthropology, even theoretical insights from disciplines like anthropology, sociology, political science, and so on and so forth. I'm sure that research scholars of this university as well as from other universities will be benefited from this exercise in the coming days. So we are fortunate to have Professor George Varghese today with us. Actually, I have circulated a brief note to our friends here, where you will find his profile, academic profile. He was a professor of philosophy in Manipal University, having done his research degrees from JNU as well as University of Bergen, later on University of Melbourne, and he shifted his area of studies from English to anthropology, from anthropology to philosophy. So it's a fascinating journey for any scholar to cross the boundaries of disciplines instead of confining oneself to the boundary of a discipline like that. Then we have to learn how to cross these boundaries so that you will get experiences of immense resources. So that's why that the students are invited to experience this sort of boundary crossing in a sense. Actually, he has crossed the boundary of the country also after his long journey from one country to another. I'm sure that you have the biodata of Varghese with you. He has done a lot of work in Deleuze and Guattari. He is the president of this collective in India, having organized a series of three major international conferences here, and a couple of volumes have already come out. I think you need a lot of intellectual energy to understand all these things, because this is not a simple exercise that they have done, inviting scholars specializing in Deleuzian studies, which is of great importance for a country like India, where universities are actually in need of philosophy content everywhere. And I have been talking about this everywhere, wherever I go. The greatness of a university or any institution of higher learning is that if you have a philosophy department, plus, if possible, a sociology department, that is a virtue, that is the greatness of an institution. But we place very less emphasis on such disciplines, sadly. Anyway, he has done a lot of work. I am sure that some of these writings will be available, and they are already available. If you look at the website, many of his writings are available, published by international publishers. I formally welcome George Varghese to this meeting. Actually, I should have started with the chair, Father Dr. K.M. George. He is a part of our journey here in this university. He is currently holding Dr. Paulose Gregorios chair. He has been a great, what should I call, a fellow traveler in academia as well as in other areas. An international scholar, I should say, having studied abroad and having done a lot of work in philosophy, literature, art, reading. Father K. George, you are formally welcome to this meeting to chair this session. And I also formally thank Chrysostom chair, Professor M.H. Ilyas here. He will be a partner in this series of lectures. And also I formally welcome my colleagues at the university. I don't want to name each and every one. And also students and research scholars from all departments here to this function. I welcome once again all invited and those who are here to listen to the wonderful lecture today. And now I request Father K.M. George to take over the proceedings of this lecture series.
Dr. K.M. Dr. George Varghese, Dr. Iucssre, and dear professors and friends. Dr. K.M. has very kindly invited me to chair this session, which I think I really deserve. It was 12 years ago that I met Dr. George Varghese at the Institute of Philosophy in Manipal. Well, then he spoke on Deleuze. I think that was my first and the best introduction to Deleuze. I was almost ignorant of that great philosopher. Although I had studied in Paris at the time when he was professor at the Experimental University in Varghese. Of course, I followed some courses on Foucault and Derrida, but somehow the name of Deleuze didn't appear in our course. So I had only very vague knowledge of what he said. But since I'm a practicing artist, later on I came to his text on painting. He wrote I think it belongs to one of his later writings on painting, so which of course is very abstract. Somewhere he says that the theory of thought needs a revolution, as in arts, because in the history of art, particularly painting, well, there is a revolution from representation to abstraction. Particularly in modern art, we see it's not representation, but a certain movement to abstraction. So he says the theory of thought also needs that revolution from visibility, from image to abstraction. But then the problem is most of us don't understand anything about what he says. But I'm sure Dr. Varghese will enlighten us on this great philosopher, who is not well known in India, but just a few minutes ago I heard that in a seminar there were some 80 papers presented by Indian research students on Deleuze. That was amazing. So I think we are really privileged to be here with Dr. Varghese. In the brochure it is said he is going to speak on historiography connected to Deleuze, but then again you have a problem, because Deleuze critically says that history is made by those who oppose history and not by those who insert themselves into history, even reshape it. So these are some of the critical sayings. I think we will have more enlightenment on that. And I stop here and invite Dr. Varghese. Thank you.
Let me welcome all of you to this session. Professor C.D., Reverend Dr. Ken George, and dignitaries, friends, all of you in the audience. First of all, I am very honored and privileged to deliver this lecture organized by the Inter-University Center for NG University. And my special thanks goes to my friend C.D. for inviting me. And thank him again. And also I'm very happy to see many of my friends, Dr. Sanal Mohan, Raju, Ilyas, like Abhilash, Matthew, like all of them here, like no. So it's a sort of an assorted people, like or audience, like some of them my friends who very closely know me, some of them who might have heard but do not know me, some of you like who have not at all heard about me, or more importantly anything about Deleuze. So first of all, this is, as Father George has said, Deleuze is not a very popular philosopher in India, like Foucault or Derrida. And is very much known for the abstractions and abstruseness with which he elaborated his system. But that may be applicable in the case of India, but in Europe he is immensely popular. probably second only to Foucault. Foucault, of course, is a door-to-door name, like no, I mean, anywhere in the West. And it's very important to say that Deleuze's role in Western intellectual history is something which many might not have noted, but it's very important to at least to specify about. He was active along with Guattari, especially in 1960s, which really saw many revolutions, many groundbreaking movements, especially May 60 student movement in Paris. At the same time, the hippie movement in the United States, Vietnam War, like Western Hemisphere was almost agog with so many uprisings, reactions. And perhaps the most important from the European side or from the intellectual side should have been the May 68 student uprising in Paris. And Deleuze was at that time in Paris teaching along with, Bardieu was his student, then Foucault, then Althusser, Lévi-Strauss, a big array of so many important thinkers and philosophers at that time. And he was writing amidst that. But he's specifically important because 60s also saw, in a way, 50s and 60s saw the marginalization of philosophy in a very important way, which was flagged or overcame by specifically two important movements. One was structuralism. Structuralism, people generally understand it like a philosophy. Structuralism is not a philosophy, it's a method. Actually, that derived by Peirce and Saussure in linguistics. On the other side, psychoanalysis, which is also, you cannot say, purely a philosophy or somewhere in between philosophy and science. And so many luminaries like Lacan, and then Marxism reinterpreted by structuralism by somebody like Althusser. Again, anthropology in a major way, like a structuralist method applied by Lévi-Strauss. Like so many things were happening, and philosophy was slightly taking and receding. Along with Sartre again became a Marxist. Who thinks that philosophy is ideology is very important. Then somewhere here and there, Levinas or Merleau-Ponty, but they were not very strong. Or after Heidegger, a strong systemic philosophy was not anywhere in the horizon, the European thinking, and it was something flagged by structuralism and psychoanalysis in a major way. It's at that juncture that Deleuze made really the system-building philosophy to come back, and his Difference and Repetition, a magnum opus which was published in 68-69, almost like contemporary with the student uprising, which really again took philosophy and inserted into the right track. That was a major revival. And shortly after, he aligned with Guattari, Felix Guattari, who is basically a semiotician. He's not a philosopher as such, and also a psychoanalyst, a student of Lacan. But they both aligned together and wrote another great classic, which is called Anti-Oedipus, which was a path-breaking work which questioned so many assumptions of psychoanalysis, or what they say, the Oedipalizing the Western society. That was a thorough raved attack on Freud and Lacan in a way sparingly, which also paved way for a new sort of thinking in Europe. But they were also contemporary with Foucault, which of course, and Foucault and Deleuze were contemporaries and friends. And Foucault actually wrote a foreword to Anti-Oedipus, and saying very clearly that if 20th century is going to be known, the century will be known as the Deleuzian century. And Foucault wrote that in the foreword. And they together, they had a sort of friends, not friends for some time, like that. It was a love-hate sort of relation. But anyhow, if we judge in that way, look back in the 60s and 70s, these two were the two important luminaries who lit the intellectual horizon of West in a major way. And after that, of course, philosophy, or is also seeing not that much of a vibrancy which 60s or 70s really were witnessing. Now there are so many new movements, like new philosophers, there is Iucssre, who is again an interpreter of Lacan, or Latour, who recently done with the actor network theory. Now there are a lot of philosophies like the speculative realism, object-oriented ontology, but these are all there, here and there. But nothing like a strong system like Foucault or Deleuze, in a sense, forwarded or created. So that is a general introduction. So secondly, must be very clear that Deleuzian system is a very abstract, abstruse system, which cannot be very simplistically unfolded. So my strategy or plan will be, I'll go through the abstract part. I don't know how far you'll be able to follow that. Then in the second part, maybe in question and answer session, I may be able to clear some of your doubts as far as to the extent what command I have on that literature. So first we go into what he has to, especially the topic today, is to say about history and historiography. First thing we have to know about Deleuze is that Deleuze is called a sort of vitalist by many, especially somebody like Varghese very clearly said that Deleuzian vitalism is something very prominent, very important. By vitalism, what he meant is that cosmos is throbbing with some kind of life energy. It is not that organisms only have life. He said that even non-organic dead matter, which we suppose it that way, also are throbbing with certain kind of life. Then how do you understand this life? The cosmic life or cosmic vitalism is a theory, like it's ancient, from the Greek times onwards you had many versions of it. But Deleuze renamed that life energy with a specific concept, along with Guattari, and that he calls desire. The cosmos or reality is throbbing with a certain form of desire. Desire is actually his concept for what we call the cosmic vitalism or life. Then, in what sense this desire or vitalism operates in nature? So, he says that desire is something intensive. So, if we just distill down his argument about desire, what he says is that everything is intensive, and intensity is the clue to what we call the vitalist structure of nature or cosmos. And why does he say so? He says that intensity is always primary to the reality, and what he calls extensity, or what he calls space, is only a certain actualization of what we call the deep-lying intensity, which comes forward and gets flattened over the earth. This he says that. So, energy or desire is basic to even extensity, or what we call matter. And intensity has to be understood in a specific way. Second important piece is that intensity is something individual. So each level of intensity is individual, and it cannot be treated or metricized or measured as the way you measure extensity or space. Or he says that intensity is a different multiplicity, extensity or space is a different multiplicity. Extensity is something which you can measure, say like 1 meter or 1 feet, you can divide into 12 equal inches. Or the the criteria or rule for the measurement of space is immanent within itself. You do not measure space with a criteria or yardstick which is something alien to space, however big or large or long, like it is measured by its own rule. But energy or intensity is not like that. Each level of energy or intensity is individualized. For example, you can measure 1 meter and another meter, and you can add it and it will definitely become 2 meters. But you cannot add 2 levels of temperature, which is an intensive quantity. The intensive quantity is like temperature, pressure, and these things, like you cannot, aggregate it or add it or like get, a value by comparing that. You cannot add 40-degree temperature water and another 40-degree temperature water and get an 80-degree temperature water. Or you cannot add a car like or something like accelerating the speed like 25 miles per hour and another car, another speed like 25 miles per hour and get 50 miles per hour. These are intensive quantity, you can never. Or say like, say I am walking. My 2 walks, added together will not make me run. So every intensive quantity, unlike extensive quantity, is individualized. Each level is individual. You cannot combine 2 intensive quantity and get something different. And this is what is like a very, very, very important in understanding the overall ontology of what Deleuze mean by, the approach to reality. For him, reality is something intensive, and intensive reality is a multiplicity of heterogeneous states, and each heterogeneous state is an individual in itself. This applies not only to physical things, but even the social aggregates also. So you cannot create concepts like class or like community or social groups just by measuring or adding, and comes to a sort of statistical average. Because like if I add the whole collective here, you can definitely like call it a group of like 10 or group of 20 or group of 30. But this addition or aggregation or averaging will not give a clue to what really this group is. That is why he substitutes such kind of concepts with a different concept called assemblage. And assemblage is something very different from concepts like class or caste or something, which of course like something which is a very original concept by Deleuze and which has become very popular, to which like today of course like I will not be going. Rather we'll come back to history. So Deleuze's theory, when applied history is also something intensive. For him, history is not a dead reality. Generally, the metaphor we use is like history is all about the dead past. So many dead past, lying there, and we're trying to retrieve the truth behind what we call this dead past. But Deleuze is opposed to that. Deleuze says that there is nothing like a continuum, or you cannot segment reality at a particular point and say that all behind that were something dead or always something burned off, and all something like after, like something which you are expecting or something new to be born. He doesn't say that. He says that you cannot isolate any point in or separate into any sort of segments or any sort of photographic images. You cannot do that. It is one continuum. And why does Deleuze say that? So Deleuze's problem with history was basically that. History itself, like we know that historiography itself has 3 important models. The first model you can say is something we call Reconstructionism. What does Reconstructionism in history means? Reconstructionism thinks that the truth of history is something that is lying in the past, and these truths have to be retrieved through evidences, and evidences have to be collected, and from these evidences you have to construct or interpret it with certain methods and come to what we call the facts of history, and facts of history will lead to what we call the truth of history. So it is sort of like what we call a Baconian inductive, very empirical sort of method. And again, the truth of history, which is lying in the past, also gives the perspective to understanding the truth. So, or to put it another way, the perspective of Reconstructionist history lies within history itself. It has nothing to do with the present or a later phase. The second model of history is what we call constructionist model. The constructionist model thinks that there's nothing like a self-evident truth that is lying there which we can just retrieve like that, and by contextualizing it or like interpreting by a logic or tool provided by history itself and reach any conclusions. For Reconstruction, the problem is that history is different from what we call historical or accounts, in the sense that history is something we have to really differentiate from what is called past. What past is something which provides certain clues or certain materials which has to be interpreted and made into certain historical accounts. So historical accounts necessarily does not mean that whatever it narrates is about all about what we call the past. Past is more important. History is only a specific articulation of understanding that past in a particular way using its own tools. The most important thing with constructionism is that it doesn't believe, unlike Reconstructionism, that the truth of history lies very innocently with the past or with the evidences or materials that are retrieved from the past. They say that evidences are very dubious, and these evidences has to be interrogated. You have to really provoke it in certain way, to provoke it interpretatively, to really elicit what is the truth in past, and through that building a historical account of that past. So in that sense, in constructionist history, concepts become very important. You can interrogate the evidence only by using concepts. So concepts become primary here. And so many concepts which are not necessarily from this history itself, but which can be interdisciplinary or drawn from other disciplines, are used to interpret what we call the constructionist history. So we know that like very important concepts like class or caste or race or city, gender, these are all concepts that are being taken from other disciplines or other intellectual fields and used to interpret what we call the materials we retrieve from the past to construct a certain narration or a certain historiography. So the danger many times is that when we use the concepts which are already there, which to an extent have some sort of a power or some sort of, may not be a good word, but some sort of ideological power in itself, so that finally the history becomes a shirt actually cut to the size of these concepts. Anything that doesn't fit or sync with these concepts are generally excluded. So you have a particular kind of history done in a particular way, or what we call a contrived sort of historical narrative. So constructionism and reconstructionism do a certain sort of historiography, which really raised a lot of problems by the time the 20th century, especially the philosophical movements, especially post-structuralism and deconstructionism and postmodernism, before them, these kind of histories really had many problems. So, what deconstructionist history or post-structuralist versions tried to do was that they discarded both the theories or methods of reconstructionism and constructionism and thought that this is something very different. I mean, history is something very different. History is not necessarily, about a reconstruction or like retrieving something or interpreting something using a sort of perspective that is already immanent in history. So their argument is that, historical truth, or what they say that historical ideas or historical constants are something rhetorically constructed, something that is already construed in certain form. And in that sense, they think that there should be an active interrogation of all sorts of this kind of historical construction, where they think that what is needed is not a historical reconstruction per se, but a historical imagination. The more important thing is that for constructionist and reconstruction history, the role of subject or the role of author was something underplayed. Whenever author comes into the scene, they think that author is something that goes against the scientific authenticity or objectivity of narrative. So always the subject was underplayed or put under the heap of evidences. It's evidences that matter. References like footnotes, like bibliography, and author is nowhere. Author tried to be as minimal as possible. But deconstruction history said, no, it should be the other way. That all these facts in the history, by the sheer logic of what we call the logic of the temporality of history, such kind of a downplaying of author is not the most desirable thing. It is the opposite way. There should be an active imagination that retrieves or that reconstructs what history is according to certain other parameters. And it is at that conjuncture that Deleuzian sort of philosophy or theory becomes important. What is to be noted is that Deleuze is also conspicuous for some serious absences. If you look closely, Deleuze never wrote on religion, a major topic. No philosopher or thinker can afford to avoid something like religion. Almost all modern important philosophers have touched on that. Also, he also never touched on politics in that way, directly, which is also very, very important. Even Foucault's talking about that, biopolitics, or like he was also very active. Deleuze never touched that. And in a direct way, though his great work or treatise on nomadology, or what we call war machine, it's a very important concept, that has many implications in political theory or analysis, but he never directly analyzed like something with something to do with government or political systems, something related to that. Like that, Deleuze also never talked about history directly. History is not something that interested him in a way. So he never addresses directly, though in a convoluted manner. He used to speak about a specific concept. It's called becoming. He's not interested about history as such, but about becoming. The reason being, history in the conventional sense for him is all dead. It is about a dead past. And something dead or shorn of his favorite concept like desire or intensity is not something that he was very particular to address or engage with. But then he came with a very important concept that he called becoming. But in a say, becoming also, though not connected with history as such in the conventional or in the historiographic sense, was connected with something different, which is a larger question, and that is the question of time. Even if we speak about, history is something only construction within the larger ontological concept of time. So time became, so he was more bothered about the primary ontological categories, one time and the other space. So under a specific combination of spatio-temporality or a specific union of space and time, which is something larger, history gets unfolded in a particular way, and it gets elaborated in a certain way, and that elaboration, immanent in itself, is something that what we call historians address or engage and try to appropriate with their own conceptual gadgets or their own systems and interpret in a different way. So for Deleuze, the primary thing, even if we connect it with historiography, is not history as such, but time. Time is something entirely different from what we call history as such. So, where does the problem of time comes in? History may be like, you can stretch it back to any extent, like ancient history or like, or like medieval history or different periodizations. Now there's contemporary history, like you can have so many periodizations. But time, which is the larger category, which subsume or encompass what we call history, has only three divisions. That is present, past and future. So for Deleuze, any history, any sort of historical construction has to be understood within the logic of what we call the temporality or the time, which has to be divided into three specific segments, which is past, future and present. And that is where he wrote a beautiful, very interesting thesis on time, which becomes very central to his magnum opus, Difference and Repetition. And this is what he called three syntheses of time. And time is something primary, history is only second, or history is only a specific unfoldment of what we call, preferably or with a priority, some form of human collectives in it, or a history of human collectives, evolution in that. But time encompasses something larger, in the sense that it is about everything in nature, everything in reality. And time encompasses not only humans or organic reality, it is about physical reality, it is about cosmos, it is about everything. So time actually poses the riddle, the real problem. And if we cannot understand what is time, then an understanding of history will have its own problems, its own shortcomings. So that is why his three famous syntheses of time in Difference and Repetition. And these syntheses, I'm sure that this is very abstract. I don't know, how far, it's going. I don't know. If you're finding it too difficult, let me suggest you, I can stop, or if you don't want to follow that, you can tell me, then we can go to maybe a question answer session where I can explicate certain things in a discussion mode. So that's there. But anyhow, the next part, which I'm going to elaborate on time, is a little abstracting, and you have to follow it very closely. And as I said, history is just a minor player under the larger ontological reality of time. And time is divided into three: present, past, and future. And Deleuze analyzes these three segments as three sorts of synthesis, which he divides again as active synthesis and passive synthesis. So the passive synthesis of time is related to what we call the present, or as such what we are in. And the active synthesis are the two other divisions, that is future and the past. So, but these three divisions he analyzes in relation to three important thinkers or philosophers. Present is analyzed with the insights he draws from Hume, David Hume. The past he analyzes from the insights he draws from Bergson, and the future with the help he draws from Nietzsche. So these three syntheses divided into past, future and present is analyzed with insights from Hume, Bergson and Nietzsche. Future we will just leave, but two other syntheses are very important. So whatever we call time, Hume argued that time has only one dimension, and that is present. Present is the only palpable reality. What I say that is past or future, these are something non-existent. Or he more cleverly will say that present is the only reality and past and future as only its two dimensions. These are there, but they are only two dimensions of what he called present. Present is the ultimate constituent reality. Then what is the problem with present? The problem with the present is that the moment you fix or identify a time, that point is already gone. Because there is nothing like a stationary time in itself as such, in which we can ground or constitute any idea or any derivation of time. The moment you say derivation, it is gone. So it is a passing show, and there is no definite stationary ground. Say like here we are sitting, we are in a space. Of course we have got a stationary space of which we have got chairs and we are sitting, and there is something called a stability. There is a stability of our situation, but with time there is no stability. The moment you look at it, is already gone. So then what is the ground of time? The ground of time is only something of a passing moment which just emerged from somewhere, pass through the present and go back to the past. And that is a very, 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 very deceptive thing. So he says that there is nothing called stationary, there are only palpitations, there are only a synthesis of time. And the important problem is that this understanding or this nature of time is not something we can understand using any other category. We cannot even think of it, because by the time we think about time, the time is gone. So he says that present, which is a passing time, is only a habit. A habit in the sense that, it is not a meditation, it is not something you can think. By the time you think, it's gone. So at the present, which is the ultimate dimension of time, for Hume is only a habit. It is just A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, it is palpitating. But in palpitating, this habit, we know that what we mean by habit. Habit is something which we always repeat. It's a sort of habit, like habit is something repetitious. So time is something always, as present is concerned, is a repetitious synthesis or repetitious continuum. But the problem is that the moment it passes, it does not pass or vanish somewhere. It is already passing into something else, which is its ground, which is what we call the past. So past is just constituted of these passing moments which flashes through the present, doesn't remain there, but goes back into a reservoir. So the time scheme for present is the real, past is something a conservation, and future is something of an expectation. But in these three, it is the present that is important for Hume. And that is why, since it's a habit, it's a palpitation, since we have no control over this time, present is something which you cannot control. You cannot meditate on that. You cannot do anything with present. It is inescapably passing. But that is why it's called a passive habit, it's a passive synthesis. But the moment it passes into something that is called, or it's an ultimate reservoir, which we call memory or whatever, like the cosmic memory which Bergson said, it is something conserved, or there is some sort of activation or deliberation we can have on that, because we can memorize that. The present experience that gone to past, we can forget that, we can memorize that. I mean, we can do any sort of exercise with that. We can decide which part of the memory we have to retrieve, yesterday's memory or day before yesterday's memory or whatever, like, you know. So, in that sense, it is something conserved and that can be retrieved. But, and that is why Bergson comes with Bergson's great theory of what we call the virtual past. So he says that what we call the passage of time is not something unreal. The passage of time, it is not a figment, because the passage of time occurs through a certain concrete reality, that you and I are part of that. And what happens to a present in which the whole physical reality is involved, when it moves into the past, he says that it is the whole reality that's moving into the past. It's not that time just passes. Time just comes through the present, occupy the whole physical reality, move to the past. And Bergson will say that it is not one aspect of reality that is passing. He says that the whole of reality has moved into that. I mean, that is the most important point. So he says that the whole of reality, when passing into the past, assumes a virtual form, or whatever is in the present is in a particular way conserved in a virtual form in the memory or in the past. And that is why it can come up in the same way. Maybe the virtual form may be the form of an image. They're all images, but they are conserved as such in a certain form, and which are not unreal, which is very real. That was the great, very revolutionary theory of Bergson. That you don't say that like present is just like that, or whatever present, when reality passes through the present, and when it passes into the past, the whole reality in a certain way is conserved into the past. So the problem, when we memorize, how do we memorize? So Bergson will say memory is only an association, in the sense that all these virtual forms, the reality that passed to the past is compressed in very compressed images formed there. And then through association, we choose to probe it. And that is why a famous novel like Proust, when the hero eats a Madeleine cake, when you taste a cake, suddenly like all his mother's house and everything comes to his memory. That is all. When we hear something, something, then we remember something associated with that. When I see certain place, or when I hear a certain music, or when I read about a philosopher, suddenly I remember I have an association with somebody who might not be logically possible. See, when I read about Foucault, sometimes memory of Raju may come. Okay, we read it, together. That's all, how you get memory of your friends, or my lover, when I'm passing through, or I have some fine experience, or fine food or something, I may remember about my mother, or I may remember about a friend of me, or my lover, whatever. So, how can this association be possible? That was his problem. Something you experience in the present, and after a long time, you were just with some association. These things are looming solidly into that. And sometimes the memory is photographic. Absolutely photographic. In dreams I have seen that. Dream is only a variation of that. I have seen more photographically, than which I might have forget in the conscious memory, I may see more graphically, in my dream. So that is where Bergson comes to the theory that nothing just gets destroyed, or reality is not an illusion, or what we call a Maya or something. This is a very solid thing. Maya is another form of materialism. It's a virtual materialism. That it is already gone to that, and that is why the construction of space or like memory is possible. In a certain way, these conserved virtual forms resuscitate and come to you. Then the problem he raises is that then the important problem is, how do you memorize this? When I memorize something, I can memorize it only in a present, because only present is real. So if I remember Raju, maybe like back in our good old JNU days, those days that memory when comes up, Raju is part of that present in which like we were together. So past is not conserved in a different form other than the present in which it occurred. That's why that memory comes. So my memory of Raju, memory means like maybe like young Raju, like that figure comes, like he might have grown older than that, or I might have grown older than that. So how can I memorize somebody exactly in the form in which I associated in a particular present? That is the more puzzling thing. So past is something trapped between two presents. That you have to conserve the memory, not into something like past, which is another dimension as such. There is no dimension like past. The past is only one dimension, and that dimension, the dimension of present, but virtualized. So when a memory comes back, and that memory has to come back in the same present, in the sense that in the present in which I experience that. And so here there is a problem with two presents. So that present coming, and that present can be felt only in the present presence in which I am. So this is where the big trap of time comes. So Bergson says that, that is the only way. So that nothing is destroyed, or in a way, nothing is destroyed. Once like reality moves into the past, it is conserved in some form and it will come back. But come back, of course, through its own mechanisms. And that is why, for him, you cannot divide. You see that? It is an intensive reality. You cannot divide that the past are all dead, and so we will write history about that. Or like we will take some other parameters and reinterpret that. No. You see, it's a very complicated relation between present, past, and or what we call history or historiography, whatever. Like no, it has to have a correct interpretation of what time as such is, or how do you retrieve the past from the past itself. So ultimately his theory was that actually space and time are one. It is not two. He says that time is the most contracted form of space, and space is the most expanded form of time. That's what he called the Bergsonian con, which of course which I cannot go into that right now. So time is nothing but the most contracted form of space, and space the most expanded form of time. These are one, actually. And that's why time is not something time is something which is very light. It is not like time is like a sort of like a basket or some holistic structure into which you shove everything. It is not that. So time is everywhere, and that is why he called time duration. Duration is, what is the, time small forms, and each thing has its own time. That's his very famous experiment with the sugar cube. he puts a sugar cube into the water and then he's looking at it. And Bergson cannot do anything to really in a way control the time of that sugar cube. Maybe you can stir it a little bit, but a sugar cube needs its own time to dissolve in water. And that is the duration which needs some action to take place. So a sugar cube's time or duration is not something you can just what we call visualize it. You have to wait. You can do that. You put a sugar cube. You can't do anything. You can stir it, but it needs its own time to dissolve. So a sugar cube time is the time. Same thing with the human body. We are actually it's a multi-temporal construction. See, like my hair will fall at a particular point. Though maybe like body as a whole organism may be having a larger time, which is the larger time. But this larger time is constituted of so many individual durations. My teeth will fall at that time. My hair will fall at a certain point. So though I as an organism, total organism may die one day, begin at one point, but this death is something which is happening slowly. So each part of me has its own particular temporality, which you cannot visualize. In that sense. So that is the whole problem with time. Time, space, and three divisions of time doesn't have what we call a simple one-to-one relation. It means that the one is imbricated in the other. And many of the time becomes a paradox, or the relation between time and body becomes a paradox. So that's why Deleuze uses like a very famous example drawn from Louis Carroll. When Louis Carroll's famous Alice, a very, very famous character, he says that Alice grows smaller and bigger at the same time. And that's the paradox. So what does it mean? When Alice grows bigger than what she was, she's also growing smaller than what she will be tomorrow, if time doesn't stop, or the growth is not even qualified. So, at the same time, any action in the time segment is biphased. If Alice grows larger than what she was yesterday, she is at the same time growing smaller than what she will be tomorrow. Think about that. And that is the paradox. So, always time is something that is a paradox. Its movement into one direction is counterpointed by a different movement in the opposite direction. So that is why time is something which he qualifies it as aeon. There are two forms of time. One form is called chronos. Chronon is the large time, the larger time, which go from one point to the other, like you can divide it like space, or you can spatialize time in that way, like clock times are all spatialized. You can calculate that. But there is another time which is called aeon. Aeon is a particular point which is divided by what we call present. Present, he defines it in such a way that it is something already past, but not yet. That is how aeon is defined. Because time is never stationary. You can only qualify it in a relation. What is present? Present is something already past, but also not yet.
So that is where aeon as a form of time becomes a paradox, or Alice grows at the same time larger and smaller. So she may grow larger than what she was, but she will also grow smaller than what she will be unless like it is stopped. That is how the big paradox with what we call time, or in another level at history. He used a particular word, counter-actualization, which is a very significant term. That whenever like something happens with history, or something happens, it at the same time, what is actualized is also counter-actualized. That is very significant. I mean, significant in the sense that, I mean, we do not know. I mean, we take birth from something, but at the same time, we also move into the past and retrieve that past in a certain form. Say like Marx. Marx, like, of course, like wrote a fantastic history. I mean, or what we call historical materialism. He wrote it using ideas from Hegel and Ricardo, Smith's political economy, everything. But the moment he wrote the treatise, he completely counter-actualized, or he completely reinterpreted of the whole theory which he drew from these illustrious thinkers, and said, okay, political economy is something very, what we call unjust, or Hegelian idealism is something which is very ideological. So at any point, history is written, that at that point, the consciousness in a particular way reconstitutes what has already gone in the past, or completely modifies the past. Every moment modifies, remodifies, reconceptualizes, or counter-actualizes what is in the past. So, and that is very, very important. And this kind of counter-actualization happens at every level. I mean, in the sense that what happened, or in the womb of history, can assume a new model. I mean, by reconstituting certain things from which we emerged. Say, for example, a dance form. What is a dance form actually? Why dance movement is very graceful? I mean, a Deleuzian will say that dance movement is nothing but the movements which we were having inside the womb when we were growing as a child. It's very important to see that. I mean, the kind of movement we were capable when we were inside the womb, you can never realize, you can never do as a living being. I mean, your head could turn 180 degree or 360 degree turns has happened, but you cannot. So he says that, I mean, what we call dance form, what all this logic of this is, we are just like memorizing or counter-actualizing another, the kind of movement which we underwent as an embryo. I mean, embryos are always moving. I mean, you can see that womb is about complete movement. I mean, that's what he analyzes. Like, no, I mean, certain movements. I mean, a grown-up human being is not capable of. This happens in the case of turtles. When turtles are in the womb, when it is maturing, like its head actually grows in particular shape, then there occurs like a 180-degree turn in that, which we are not capable. And that is why we find acrobatics or dance forms so graceful. And these movements are, in a way, we were also capable of doing that we call an amniotic memory. We were also doing that. So, the kind of movement we were capable at one point, I mean, we may be retrieved at another point, and we will have like something like what we call forms like aesthetics, art, or these are all maybe basic biological movements which we were capable of doing, or we were experiencing at a particular level when we were being nurtured as biological beings. I mean, otherwise, that is why, a dancer is capable of so many movements. Why it's become graceful? It is because, that is a memory from the movement, which we were also capable, or we also underwent when we were, in the womb, or when we were being nurtured. So history or like something is not something like a dead past or something that has already been a spent force. History for Deleuze in that way is something alive or something always like a grow with us, and that is how like he sees it, and that is why for him the term history is not important, but the term what he called becoming, because like becoming is something which he uses in a very important way. That becoming is something which is part of the human, though it has something to do with history, but it is different. So he says that becoming is something like which we all do, I mean, in our life, or which we all are capable of doing. And he says that we have a habit of like becoming child or becoming woman or becoming other, like no, these are all, I mean, becomings, like say like like we all like experience that becoming child at certain point, or becoming animal at certain other point, and which at certain points become very important in our life, and so history has to be rethought or reconstituted, not as something of a chronicling of dead past, or taking out some records from the past and just arrange it, or impose a certain form of rational logic on that, and just say that this is the whole, more important, the truth about a particular thing. Of course, you can arrange and say something, but to claim that that is the whole truth about a particular period in the past cannot be doing justice to that. That doesn't mean history should not be written, or like history should not be practiced, but to claim the truth of history, the truth in quote, and that is something more important, because truth is not something stationary, or truth is something at every point getting reconstituted. That the truth in 17th century, like with a new theory like Marxism, can be reinterpreted in a new way, or maybe Marxism itself can be reinterpreted maybe in future when a new theory comes. Like so every present is in active dialogue with history, and at every point any new thing happens, a history is completely reinterpreted. That is why there is nothing called stationary. Alice grew bigger, at the same time smaller. I mean, history is written, or a particular truth is written, but that truth at the next moment will be reevaluated, or reconstituted, or reactualized, or counteractualized. And so history and time has a problematic relation, and that is where, I mean, we have to really think history in terms of time, and time is the larger ontological reality under which history is one particular discipline with one particular mode of practice, and that mode of practice can be in many ways. Like I mean, you can amend it, you can correct it, or you can modify it, but that critical relation between time and history is very important. Don't identify one with the other. Don't think past is all history or time is history, and that will be a wrong idea. So with that, I'll stop here. But you know that Deleuze is difficult and maybe very uninteresting also. But probably in the question and answer session, I may be able to clarify some of your doubts, not everything, but let us go in that. Thank you. Thank you.